Danny Cole had worked on Orbital Station Harmony 7 for 6 years. He was a cargo inspector, which meant he spent his days checking boxes and containers that came from hundreds of different worlds. It was not exciting work, but Danny liked it. He liked the routine. He liked knowing that everything had its proper place. The station was home to dozens of alien species. Some were tall and thin. Some were short and covered in scales. Some had too many eyes and some had no eyes at all. Danny had learned to work with all of them. He smiled when they were rude. He stayed calm when they shouted. He filled out his forms and did his job and went home to his small quarters at the end of each shift. Most aliens on the station thought very little of humans. Humanity had only joined galactic society 40 years ago. Compared to species that had traveled between stars for thousands of years, humans were bobbies. They were small. They were soft. They had no claws or fangs or natural armor. Many aliens looked at humans and saw nothing worth respecting. Danny was used to this. He had been pushed aside in corridors. He had been spoken to like a child. He had watched aliens laugh at human customs and mock human limitations. Through all of it, Danny remained patient. Getting angry solved nothing. Filing complaints and following proper procedures sometimes solved things. So Danny filed complaints and followed procedures and kept his temper locked away where no one could see it. On this particular morning, a new delegation arrived at the station. They were a species that looked like giant insects standing upright. They had hard shells the color of dried blood and arms that ended in sharp points. They were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive traders who took what they wanted and crushed anyone who stood in their way. Danny watched them march through the arrival terminal. There were about 30 of them, led by a particularly large individual named Hal. Danny knew the name from his briefing files. Hal was a merchant lord with a reputation for cruelty and a complete lack of respect for other species. They did not wait in line like everyone else. They pushed through crowds, knocking smaller aliens aside. When a security officer tried to direct them to the proper customs checkpoint, Hal simply walked past as if the officer did not exist. Danny sighed and returned to his work. This was not his problem. Station security would handle it. That was how things worked on Harmony 7. But station security did not handle it. They were given priority processing because the Galactic Council did not want to create a diplomatic incident. They were assigned prime trading space in the main commercial sector. They were allowed to do whatever they wanted because no one wanted to tell them no. By the third day, they had claimed an entire section of the trading floor as their territory. They charged fees to anyone who wanted to pass through. They threatened merchants who complained. They broke things that belonged to others and laughed when the owners cried. Danny's friend told him about what happened to the family. They were small, furry creatures with big eyes and gentle voices. They had a booth where they sold handmade crafts from there. The crafts had been in their family for generations. Hal had walked into their booth and started touching everything. When the father asked him politely to be careful, Hal swept his arm across the display shelf and sent everything crashing to the floor. Then he stepped on the broken pieces while the family watched in horror. His voice shook as she described the sound the children made. It was not crying exactly. It was worse than crying. Danny listened to the whole story. His face showed nothing. When finished, he nodded and said he would file a complaint. Stared at him like he had said something insane. A complaint, she repeated. That was his response to what she had just described. Danny told her that proper channels existed for a reason. Getting emotional helped no one. The system would handle things if they gave it time. Walked away looking disappointed. Danny understood why. He was disappointed too, but he knew that losing control of his anger would only make things worse. It always made things worse. His father had taught him that lesson when Danny was young. Hold it in, his father would say. Hold it in until holding it in is no longer an option. Then God help whoever made you let it out. Danny filed his complaint and returned to work. That evening, he was walking through the commercial sector when he passed the territory. Hal was standing near the border with several of his followers. They were laughing about something. When they saw Danny, their laughter got louder. Hal called out to him. He asked if Danny was the human who had filed a complaint about the poor little crafts. His voice dripped with mockery. Danny stopped walking. He turned to face Hal and said yes, he had filed that complaint. Hal walked closer. He was almost twice Danny's height. His shell gleamed under the station lights. He asked Danny what he thought a piece of paper would accomplish. Did humans truly believe that writing words on documents changed anything? Danny said nothing. Hal reached out and knocked the drink container from Danny's hand. Warm liquid splashed across Danny's uniform. The behind Hal made sounds that might have been laughter. Danny looked down at his stained uniform. He looked up at Hal. His expression remained completely blank. Hal leaned closer. He said that humans were soft prey animals who should learn their place in the galaxy. He said that the strong took what they wanted and the weak accepted what they were given. He asked Danny which category he belonged to. Danny's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough that someone watching very carefully might have noticed, but his voice remained calm when he spoke. He told Hal to have a pleasant evening, then he turned and walked away. They laughed and shouted insults at his back. Danny did not respond. He kept walking until he reached his quarters. He closed the door behind him and stood in the darkness for a long time. Across the station, in the diplomatic wing, an elderly named ambassador was reviewing security footage from the commercial sector. She had studied humans for decades. She had written papers about their psychology and their history and their strange capacity for both kindness and violence. When she saw the footage of Danny walking away from Hal, she did not see weakness. She saw something that made her immediately contact her staff and order them to prepare evacuation routes. Her assistant asked what was wrong. Ambassador pointed at the screen. She pointed at Danny's face in the moment before he turned away. She told her assistant to look at his eyes. Look at how still they had become. Look at how his breathing had slowed. The assistant did not understand. Ambassador explained that humans had a threshold. Most species expressed anger through immediate aggression. Humans were different. Humans stored their anger like fuel in a tank. They held it and compressed it and kept it contained through sheer willpower. But tanks had limits, and when a human's tank finally ruptured, the results were catastrophic. She told her assistant to watch the situation very carefully, because those fools had no idea what they were doing. They thought they were tormenting prey. They were actually teaching a human how much he was willing to endure. And that lesson always had a final exam. 3 days passed. They grew bolder with each one. They had taken control of 4 trading sectors now. Merchants who refused to pay their fees found their goods destroyed. Species who complained found themselves surrounded by clicking warriors until they apologized for causing trouble. The station security forces watched and did nothing because their orders from above told them to avoid conflict with the delegation. Danny continued his work. He inspected cargo. He filed reports. He ate his meals alone in the corner of the cafeteria where no one bothered him. Other humans on the station had started avoiding the commercial areas entirely. They walked the long way around to reach their destinations. They kept their heads down and hoped they would eventually leave. Found Danny during his lunch break. She sat across from him without asking permission and demanded to know why he was being so passive. Did he not see what was happening? Did he not care? Danny set down his fork. He told that he cared very much. He told her that he had filed 17 complaints in the past 3 days. He had documented every incident he witnessed. He had sent reports to the station commander and the Galactic Council Trade Commission and 3 different oversight committees. Asked what good that would do. Danny said he did not know, but it was the proper way to handle things. Losing his temper would only give them an excuse to claim humans were violent and dangerous. It would hurt every human on the station. It would hurt every human trying to build a life among the stars. Shook her head. She told Danny that sometimes proper channels were just a way for powerful people to ignore problems until they went away. Danny had no response to that. He picked up his fork and continued eating. In the diplomatic wing, Ambassador requested an emergency meeting with Commodore, the officer who commanded the station. Was a tall being covered in gray scales. He had commanded Harmony 7 for 15 years and considered himself an expert on managing delicate situations. Presented her concerns. She showed data on human psychology. She explained the concept of patience as a survival mechanism. She described what happened when human patience finally ended. Listened politely. When finished, he told her that he appreciated her research but saw no cause for alarm. The humans on his station had been model citizens for years. They followed rules. They avoided confrontation. They were perhaps the least threatening species under his command. Tried to explain that this was precisely the problem. Humans did not give warnings the way other species did. They did not growl or puff up or display aggression before attacking. They simply endured and endured and endured until something broke inside them. And when that break happened, it happened all at once. Thanked her for her time and ended the meeting. Returned to her quarters and began making private arrangements for her staff to leave the station quickly if necessary. That same afternoon, a young human named Lucy Barnes was working in Maintenance Tunnel 7. Lucy was 22 years old. This was her first assignment away from Earth. She had dreamed of traveling among the stars since she was a little girl, and now she was here, fixing power conduits on an alien space station. Everything still felt magical to her. She did not hear Hal approaching until his shadow fell across her workspace. The merchant lord was alone. He had been exploring the station, looking for new areas to claim. When he saw the young human female crawling out of an access panel, he decided to have some fun. He asked Lucy what she was doing in his territory. Lucy looked around in confusion. She explained that this was a maintenance corridor. It did not belong to anyone. Hal stepped closer. He said that everything on this station would belong to the Soon Enough, including the soft little humans who threw the walls like vermin. Lucy tried to back away. Hal grabbed her toolkit and threw it against the wall. Tools scattered across the floor. Some of them had been gifts from her father. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. She asked why he was doing this. Hal found her fear amusing. He leaned down until his face was close to hers. He told her that he was doing this because he could, because humans were weak, because no one would stop him. A voice came from the end of the corridor. It said that Lucy should gather her things and go. Hal turned. Danny Cole was standing 15 meters away. His hands were at his sides. His expression showed nothing at all. Hal laughed. He asked if this was the same human who had walked away with drink stains on his uniform. He asked if Danny had come to file another complaint. Danny did not answer the question. He told Lucy again to gather her tools and leave. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something Lucy did not recognize. She gathered what she could carry and hurried past Danny toward the exit. As she passed him, she noticed that his hands were completely still, not relaxed, still, like he was holding them in place through conscious effort. When Lucy was gone, Hal walked toward Danny. He asked what the human intended to do. Would he write another report? Would he fill out another form? Danny spoke slowly and clearly. He told Hal that they should study human history. He suggested they research the things humans had done to each other over the centuries, the wars, the perseverance, the absolute refusal to accept defeat even when defeat was certain. Hal stopped walking. Something in Danny's tone made him pause. Danny continued. He said that humans had a saying, Do not mistake kindness for weakness. He said that humans chose to be kind. They chose to be patient. They chose to follow rules and file complaints and believe in systems. But choices could be changed. Hal stared at Danny for a long moment. Then he made the clicking sound that meant laughter among his kind. He told Danny that words meant nothing. He told Danny that tomorrow he would learn what happened to humans who forgot their place. Danny nodded slightly. He said he would be at his workstation at the usual time. Then he turned and walked away. Word of the confrontation spread through the station. Most species dismissed it as meaningless. The human had done nothing. The human had walked away again. The human was obviously a coward. But some species reacted differently. A merchant closed his booth and booked passage on the next transport leaving the station. A group packed their remaining belongings and moved to the far side of Harmony 7. An old trader who had visited Earth once gathered the young members of his species and told them to stay away from the commercial sector for the next few days. When one of them asked why, the old trader shared something he had learned on Earth. He said that humans had different kinds of anger. Loud anger meant they were processing their emotions. Loud anger would pass. But when a human went quiet, when their voice dropped and their movements became still and controlled, that meant something else entirely. That meant they had stopped being angry. That meant they had started making decisions. And the decisions humans made in that state were the reason their species had conquered their entire planet before ever reaching for the stars. Across the station, Danny Cole returned to his quarters. He sat on his bed and looked at his hands. They were steady now. The trembling had stopped. He thought about Lucy's face. He thought about the children watching their family treasures shatter on the floor. He thought about every species on this station who had learned to fear them because no one was willing to stop them. Danny had spent 6 years being patient, 6 years following rules, 6 years believing that if he just endured long enough, the system would work. Tomorrow he would find out if he had been right, or if he had been a fool. The morning began like any other morning on Station Harmony 7. Merchants opened their booths. Workers reported to their stations. The great machinery of galactic commerce continued its endless grinding. Danny Cole arrived at his workstation at exactly the same time he always did. He wore a clean uniform. His hair was neatly combed. He carried his inspection equipment in a case at his side. Nothing about him suggested that this day would be any different from the thousands of days before it. He worked for 2 hours without incident. He inspected containers from 3 different worlds. He filed his reports. He drank a cup of coffee that had gone cold while he was busy. Then his communicator buzzed, a message from 2 words trading floor. Danny set down his equipment. He walked calmly through the corridors toward the main commercial sector. Other workers passed him going the opposite direction. Some of them were moving quickly. A few were almost running. When Danny reached the trading floor, he understood why. Hal stood in the center of the open space with 6 other warriors arranged behind him. They had pushed back the nearby merchant booths to create a clearing. A crowd of aliens had gathered at the edges, watching with nervous curiosity. Hal saw Danny enter. He spread his arms wide in a gesture of welcome. He announced loudly that the human had finally arrived. He said they had been waiting to continue their conversation from the day before. Danny walked toward the clearing. He did not hurry. He did not slow down. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Ambassador entered the trading floor from a side corridor. She took one look at the scene and froze. Her assistant started to ask what was happening but silenced him with a sharp gesture. She activated her emergency beacon and sent a single command to every on the station: evacuate immediately. Other species noticed the leaving. Some of them started to follow without knowing why. Something in the air had changed. Something that felt like the pressure drop before a storm. Hal watched Danny approach with amusement. When Danny was 10 meters away, Hal raised one clawed hand and commanded him to stop. He told Danny to kneel. Danny stopped walking. He did not kneel. Hal's amusement faded slightly. He repeated his command. He told Danny that all humans on this station would learn to show proper respect to the... They would begin with Danny. He would kneel and apologize for every complaint he had filed. Then he would crawl out of the trading floor on his hands and knees so everyone could see what humans truly were. Danny stood motionless. His breathing was slow and even. His hands hung loosely at his sides. The behind Hal began clicking in what might have been laughter. Their shells gleamed under the harsh station lights. A merchant at the edge of the crowd grabbed his children and began pushing toward the exits. Hal stepped forward. He asked Danny if he was deaf or simply stupid. Did he not understand who he was dealing with? Did he not understand what would happen if he refused? Danny finally spoke. His voice was quiet, not weak, just quiet, like distant thunder that had not yet arrived. He asked Hal one question. He asked if there was certain this was what he wanted. Hal made a sound of contempt. He reached out and shoved Danny's shoulder. Danny did not move. His feet stayed planted on the floor as if they were welded there. Hal frowned. He pushed harder. Danny swayed slightly but did not step back. Something flickered across Hal's face. Confusion, perhaps, or the first tiny seed of doubt. Danny reached up slowly and removed the badge from his uniform. He looked at it for a moment. 6 years of perfect service. 6 years of doing everything right. He set the badge carefully on a nearby counter. Then he rolled up his sleeves. The crowd went absolutely silent. Even the species who did not understand human body language could feel that something fundamental had shifted. Hal took a step back without meaning to. He ordered his warriors forward. He told them to teach the human a lesson he would never forget. The first warrior lunged at Danny, with his blade arms extended. What happened next lasted less than 2 minutes. It would be studied and analyzed and debated across the galaxy for decades. Danny moved, not frantically, not desperately. He moved like water flowing around stones. He moved like a machine designed for a single purpose. The first missed his strike because Danny was no longer where he had been. Danny's elbow connected with the soft joint beneath the warrior's shell. The crack was audible throughout the trading floor. The second and third attacked together. Danny dropped beneath their swinging arms and drove his fist into the knee of one while sweeping the legs of the other. They hit the ground in a tangle of limbs. The fourth managed to cut Danny's arm with a blade strike. Blood appeared on Danny's sleeve. He did not seem to notice. He grabbed this arm and twisted. The joint bent the wrong direction. The warrior screamed. The fifth and sixth hesitated. That hesitation cost them. Danny was already moving. He used the injured fourth warrior as a shield and then a weapon, throwing the body into his companions. Before they could recover, Danny was on them. Precise strikes, controlled violence, nothing wasted. In 90 seconds, all 6 warriors were on the ground. Some were conscious and groaning. Some were not moving at all. Hal stood alone. Danny turned to face him. Blood dripped from the cut on his arm. His uniform was torn. His breathing was slightly elevated. That was all. Hal backed away. His mandibles clicked rapidly. He demanded to know what Danny was. He said this was impossible. Humans were weak. Humans were prey. Danny walked toward him, not running, walking, like he had all the time in the world. He spoke as he walked. His voice remained calm and level. He told Hal that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history as prey animals. They had been hunted by predators faster than them, stronger than them, better armed than them. They had survived anyway. He told Hal that humans did not have claws or fangs or armor, so they developed something else. They developed endurance that let them chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They developed pattern recognition that let them predict enemy movements. They developed tool use and cooperation, and the absolute refusal to stop fighting until the threat was eliminated. Danny stopped 1 meter from Hal. He looked up at the merchant lord who towered over him. He said that humans did not enjoy violence. They preferred peace. They preferred negotiation and compromise and proper procedures. But when peace was no longer an option, humans committed to violence completely. Not anger, not rage, something colder than that. Something that had been refined over millions of years of survival against impossible odds. Hal tried to strike Danny with his blade arm. Danny caught the arm. He twisted. Hal fell to his knees with a shriek of pain. Danny leaned close to his face. He said that humans did not lose fights they had decided to win. He suggested that Hal remember that lesson. Then Danny released him and stepped back. The trading floor was nearly empty now. Species had fled in every direction. Only a few remained, frozen in place by shock or fear or morbid fascination. Station security arrived moments later. Commodore led them personally, his scaled face showing disbelief at the scene before him. Ambassador walked calmly through the security forces. She stopped beside Danny and looked at the groaning scattered across the floor. She turned to Commodore. Her voice was tired but not surprised. She reminded him that she had warned him. She told him that humans had a threshold. Danny had found his. The recording spread across the galaxy in less than a day. Someone in the crowd had captured the entire confrontation on their personal device. Within hours, copies appeared on information networks spanning hundreds of worlds. Within days, billions of beings had watched a single human dismantle 7 warriors in 90 seconds. The footage was analyzed by military academies on 40 different planets. Experts studied Danny's movements frame by frame. They noted his economy of motion. They noted how he never struck twice when once was enough. They noted the complete absence of hesitation or fear in his body language. A combat instructor watched the recording 17 times. Then he gathered his students and told them that everything they had believed about humans was wrong. He told them that when you push a human too far, you are not dealing with a frightened prey animal. You are dealing with 3 million years of survival instincts compressed into a body that refuses to quit. On Station Harmony 7, Danny Cole sat in a holding cell waiting for his fate to be decided. The delegation demanded justice. They claimed that Danny had launched an unprovoked assault on their diplomatic representatives. They demanded his immediate execution, or, at minimum, permanent imprisonment. They threatened to withdraw from all trade agreements with the Galactic Council if their demands were not met. The hearing took place 2 weeks after the incident. Danny was escorted into the council chamber by a security team that seemed nervous to be anywhere near him. He wore simple clothes. The cut on his arm had healed into a thin white scar. Sat in the observation gallery, watching with barely contained anxiety. Beside Danny at the defense table was a human legal representative named Price, a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes who had volunteered for the case when no one else would take it. The lead prosecutor spent an hour describing the injuries Danny had inflicted: broken limbs, shattered joints, permanent nerve damage, one warrior who might never walk again. He painted Danny as a violent savage who had attacked without warning or provocation. Then it was the defense's turn. Price did not speak. Instead, he yielded his time to Ambassador, who had requested permission to testify on Danny's behalf. Walked slowly to the center of the chamber. She was old even by standards. Her movements were deliberate. Her voice was clear and calm. She began by presenting evidence. Security recordings from the 2 weeks before the confrontation. Footage of Hal destroying the family's possessions. Audio of threats against human workers. Documentation of complaints that had been filed and ignored. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had personally signed off on dismissing those complaints. Then changed her approach. She told the council that she had studied humans for 60 years. She had visited there. She had read their histories and observed their behaviors and tried to understand what made them different from every other species in the galaxy. She explained that humans were a paradox. They were capable of extraordinary compassion. They built hospitals and schools. They adopted orphaned children from other species. They risked their lives to save strangers. But they were also capable of extraordinary violence. Their history was filled with wars that killed millions. They had developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had hunted species to extinction on their own planet before they even reached the stars. The key to understanding humans, explained, was understanding that these two capabilities came from the same source. Humans cared deeply about their families, about their communities, about abstract concepts like justice and fairness. When those things were threatened, humans responded with everything they had. She activated a display screen and showed the council footage from human history. Soldiers continuing to fight with wounds that would have killed any other species. Civilians refusing to evacuate burning cities. Individuals standing alone against impossible odds simply because they believed it was right. A council member interrupted. He asked what any of this had to do with the charges against Danny Cole. Turned to face him. She said it had everything to do with the charges. Danny had not attacked the. Danny had endured abuse and humiliation and threats for weeks while following every proper procedure available to him. Danny had watched the terrorize innocent merchants and threaten young human workers and face no consequences whatsoever. And then the had pushed one step too far. She pointed at Danny, who sat quietly at the defense table with his hands folded in front of him. She told the council to look at him. Really look at him. This was not a violent man. This was a man who had spent 6 years being a model citizen, a man who filed complaints instead of throwing punches, a man who walked away from confrontations that most species would have escalated. They had not been attacked by a monster. They had been answered by a human who had finally run out of patience. The council deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the lead member announced their decision. The charges against Danny Cole were dismissed. The incident was ruled as justified self-defense. Furthermore, the delegation was ordered to leave Station Harmony 7 within 24 hours and was banned from returning for a period of 10 years. Hal screamed objections from his seat. Security officers had to restrain him as he was escorted from the chamber. The recording of the verdict spread almost as quickly as the recording of the fight itself. Across the galaxy, species began reassessing their understanding of humans. Military strategists updated their threat assessments. Diplomats reviewed their protocols for human interaction. Merchants who had previously dismissed human traders as insignificant suddenly became much more polite. On Harmony 7, Danny returned to work, but everything had changed. Aliens who had once pushed past him in corridors now stepped aside and nodded respectfully. Merchants who had never acknowledged his existence suddenly wanted to know his name. Species that had mocked humans for decades now watched them with wary respect. Found Danny in the cafeteria on his first day back. She sat across from him and asked how it felt to be famous. Danny shrugged. He said he did not feel famous. He felt tired. He told that he had never wanted any of this. He had just wanted to do his job and live his life and not cause any trouble. Nodded slowly. Then she asked the question that everyone wanted to ask but no one had the courage to voice. She asked if Danny would do it again. Danny was quiet for a long time. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had broken bones, the same hands that had filed hundreds of useless complaints. He told that he hoped he would never have to find out. He said that violence should always be the last option, the absolute last option. He said that every time someone chose violence, they lost a piece of themselves that they could never get back. but he also said that sometimes the last option was the only option. And when that happened, hesitation was not something humans understood. Reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Across the station, a young warrior named Al watched a recording of Danny's words. He was one of Hal's students, left behind when the delegation was expelled. He watched Danny speak about violence being the last option. He watched Danny's face as he said the words, and for the first time in his life, Al understood something important. Humans were not weak because they chose peace. Humans chose peace because they knew exactly how terrible they could be if they chose war. And that knowledge was more frightening than any display of aggression could ever be. 6 months changed everything. Danny Cole was no longer a cargo inspector. The Galactic Council had appointed him as head of security for Station Harmony 7, a position no human had ever held before. He had not asked for the promotion. He had actually tried to refuse it twice, but Commodore had insisted, and eventually Danny had accepted. The station was different now, safer, quieter. Merchants conducted their business without fear. Species that had once bullied their way through the trading floor now followed the rules like everyone else, not because they had suddenly developed respect for regulations, but because they had developed a healthy respect for consequences. Humans throughout the galaxy experienced similar changes. They were no longer dismissed as soft newcomers. They were no longer pushed aside in corridors or mocked for their lack of natural weapons. They were treated with courtesy, even by species that had never shown courtesy to anyone before. Some humans found this uncomfortable. They did not like being feared. They had not come to the stars to frighten people. Danny understood that feeling. He shared it. But he also understood that fear and respect were sometimes the same thing, and that a reputation for strength could prevent more violence than it caused. Then the crisis came. Appeared at the edge of a system containing a small colony world called Meridian. The colony had 12 million inhabitants from 7 different species. 3,000 of them were human. They were conquerors. Their empire had swallowed dozens of worlds over the past century. They took what they wanted and enslaved anyone who survived the taking. There consisted of 40 heavy cruisers and over 100 support vessels. The colony had no meaningful defenses. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions. Diplomats argued. Military advisors calculated response times. A proper defense force could be assembled, but it would take at least 3 weeks to arrive. They would finish their conquest in 3 days. Danny watched the debates from Station Harmony 7. He saw species talking themselves in circles while millions of lives hung in the balance. He saw proper procedures being followed while a colony prepared to die. He remembered filing complaints while they terrorized innocent merchants. Danny requested permission to lead a diplomatic mission to the fleet. The council representatives laughed at him. What could a single human accomplish against 40 warships? Danny told them that he would accomplish whatever he could. He asked only for a fast ship and a small crew. If he failed, the council would lose nothing it was not already losing. If he succeeded, the colony might survive long enough for real help to arrive. Ambassador supported his request. She told the council that humans had a talent for accomplishing the impossible when properly motivated. She told them that 3,000 human lives were at stake on Meridian. The council gave Danny his ship. Volunteered to join him before he even asked. So did Price, the legal representative who had defended Danny at his hearing. So did a dozen other humans from the station who had heard what was happening and refused to stand by while their people faced extermination. The ship was called the Swift Current. It was small and fast and completely unarmed. It reached the Meridian system in 2 days. The flagship was called the Fist of Conquest. It was larger than some space stations. When Danny transmitted his request for a diplomatic meeting, the commander responded with what sounded like amusement. General L agreed to meet the human delegation. He was curious about the species that had humiliated the. Danny boarded the flagship with only at his side. The ship's corridors were lined with armed warriors who watched the two humans pass with expressions of contempt and hunger. They were tall and powerful, with tusked faces and arms thick as tree trunks. General L waited in a command chamber decorated with trophies from conquered worlds. He was massive even by standards. Scars covered his face and arms, each one a story of combat survived. He looked at Danny, and the way a predator looks at something too small to be worth eating. He asked why he should not simply destroy their tiny ship and continue his conquest. What could two humans possibly offer that would change his plans? Danny stood calmly before the general. He did not try to appear larger than he was. He did not raise his voice or make threats. He simply talked. He told Elle about the colony on Meridian. He described the 3,000 humans living there. He described what humans were capable of when their families were threatened. Then he told Elle about what had happened on Station Harmony 7. He described the fight with the in plain, factual terms. 7 warriors, 90 seconds. He did not brag. He did not exaggerate. He just stated what had happened. Elle listened with growing interest. He had seen the recordings. Everyone had seen the recordings, but hearing the story from the human who had lived it was different. Danny finished his account and asked Elle a question. He asked how many soldiers the general was willing to lose taking Meridian. He explained that every single human on that colony would fight. Every man, every woman, every child old enough to hold a weapon. They would fight in the streets and in the buildings and in the tunnels beneath the ground. They would not surrender. They would not flee. They would make the pay for every meter of ground in blood. Danny's voice remained calm as he spoke, almost gentle. He told Elle that humans did not win wars by being stronger. They won wars by being stubborn, by refusing to accept defeat even when defeat was certain, by making victory so expensive that enemies eventually decided it was not worth the price. Then Danny offered an alternative: trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, economic partnerships that would benefit the far more than the rubble of a destroyed colony ever could. He offered friendship instead of war. Elle studied Danny for a long moment. The general had conquered a dozen worlds. He had faced enemies far more powerful than this small human standing before him. But he had never faced an enemy who stood so calmly while discussing his own potential death. He had never faced an enemy whose eyes showed neither fear nor anger, only absolute certainty. Elle asked Danny if he was bluffing. Danny thought about the question carefully. Then he told the truth. He said he did not know. That answer surprised Elle more than anything else Danny had said. He asked what Danny meant. Danny explained that humans did not always know their own limits until they reached them. He told Elle that he hoped he was bluffing. He hoped this meeting would end with handshakes and trade agreements and everyone going home alive. But he also knew that if they attacked Meridian, something inside him would change. Something that had changed 6 months ago on Station Harmony 7. And once that change happened, Danny would not stop until the threat was eliminated or he was dead. He told Elle that was what made humans dangerous. They did not know what they were capable of until they were pushed far enough to find out. Elle was silent for a very long time. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound that shook his massive frame. He told Danny that he liked him. He said that any species that could produce individuals willing to board an enemy flagship alone and stare down a general had earned his respect. The negotiations lasted 4 hours. When they ended from the Meridian system, trade agreements were signed. The colony was saved. Danny returned to Station Harmony 7 as something more than famous. He returned as a symbol of what humans could accomplish when they committed themselves fully. Ambassador visited him in his office a week later. She asked the same question that Elle had asked. Had Danny been bluffing? Danny looked out at the stars visible through his window. Millions of points of light, each one a sun with worlds that might someday know humans. He told that he still did not know. He said he hoped he would never have to find out. Nodded slowly. She told Danny that uncertainty was precisely what made humans so effective. Their enemies could never be sure they were bluffing, because humans themselves were never entirely certain. She left Danny alone with his thoughts. The galaxy had learned something important in the past 6 months. Humans were kind by choice. Humans were patient by choice. Humans preferred peace and negotiation and proper procedures. But when all those choices were taken away, when humans were pushed past their threshold of tolerance, something else emerged. Something forged by millions of years of surviving against predators and disasters and each other. That something did not negotiate, it did not hesitate, it did not stop. And that was why, across 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 space stations, species had learned a simple rule. Do not annoy the humans. Because you never knew which annoyance would be the one that pushed them too far. And by the time you found out, it would already be too late.